I'm Louis Baltz. I was born 66 years ago in Southern California. I began taking photographs when I was 11 years old. By the time I was 12 years old, I had decided that I wished to be an artist who worked with photography. I was trained in art schools to use photography as an art medium. I was never really trained to do anything practical with photography. Applied photography, whether it's reportage or fashion or whatever, is completely uninteresting for me. I think photography as such is not necessarily interesting. It's interesting as an art medium when it can intersect with other aesthetic, social questions. What is special about photography? It's the only deductive art. Every other art that I can think of begins in some way with the tabula rasa, or a blank sheet of A4 paper, or a theater awaiting dancers and lights. Photography begins with a world that's perhaps overfull and needs to sort out from that world what's meaningful. I think there are a number of ways you can speak about what is the subject of a photograph, and one thing could be a set of issues that are philosophical or social or aesthetic or political. But in the very simplest sense of the word, is what is the camera looking at and why am I looking at that? I looked at it because it was commonplace and ordinary. It was around me everywhere. When I photographed tract houses in Southern California, everyone I knew grew up in a house like that. I grew up in a house like that. This was simply the overwhelmingly dominant mode of residential building in that part of the world. And yet no one seemed to want to look at it. I mean, now everyone talks about this and it's become very standard, trite subject matter. But at that time, a lot of the world was oddly obscene for photography. That is, it couldn't be portrayed. And I'm not talking about things that involved sexuality or even politics, but there seemed to be a horror of facing the environment that we made for ourselves. I felt, okay, this is the hand that you've dealt me. These are the fruits of, mid-period American capitalism that you've given us to, well, look at them. There's not one task for art, there are many tasks. And I can't write off work such as, Cy Twombly. I mean, this is work that's about sheer beauty. But this isn't my concern particularly. The world divides between the people who respond to Matisse and the people who respond to Duchamp. I love looking at Matisse, but Duchamp is 1,000 times more interesting. I admire beauty, but as an aesthetic position, I will leave that for others who are better equipped than I am to work in that way. For something to be interesting to me, it needs to engage a number of issues. For me, a work of art is something that's interesting to think about, more than something that's interesting to look at. I'm always asked the question of why there are no people in my photographs. But in fact, in my work, there is so much evidence of human effort. The place for people in my work is the viewer. Without the viewer to complete the experience of a work of art, mine or anyone else's, that work doesn't really exist.